Story 1. Complainers lower morale for everyone and never offer viable solutions. There is no benefit to it. Story 2. I am all for complaining when something is truly problematic and nothing can be done about it. I just dislike when people complain about something that has a solution. Story 3. People do not mind a complaint. They mind when it becomes a personality. Constant complaining signals that you would rather stay in the problem than work toward a solution. Story 4. Venting is fine. I think everyone does it. However, I abhor when people complain about things they have control over but still choose the wrong decisions or choose not to do anything about it. Story 5. My wife complains about everything. It is like a full-time job for her. Now, do not get me wrong. I love my wife, but the complaining and constant negativity make it really difficult to want to talk sometimes. I find myself looking for ways to end conversations or at least change the subject. Often, it is as if she is stuck in a loop where even she cannot move on to something else. It is exhausting to be around negative people. Story 6. Complainers do nothing to solve problems. They just whine and are part of the problem. Doers help find solutions and accomplish tasks. Being a doer and a problem solver is a highly valued trait. Complainers are generally egotistical and self-serving. They only work for and worry about themselves. Doers are concerned about others, not just themselves. They work for the greater good, whether for their own benefit or the benefit of others. Complainers evoke negative emotions like frustration and annoyance. Negativity is contagious. Doers inspire positive feelings like respect and motivation. Story 7. Complaining means you have not realized that it is not up to others to make your life what you want it to be. Be proactive, not passive. Story 8. Their ability to take the fun out of everything. My mother-in-law is a big complainer. She offered to take my husband and me out for dinner for our birthday, which is the same day, and we accepted. However, before we even set it up, she was complaining. We ended up declining the offer altogether because she complained so much. She did the same thing with my baby shower. She practically begged to throw it, and when I agreed, she complained about everything. She absolutely ruined it for us. Story 9. I do not mind if people complain as long as they are trying to change what they are complaining about. I do not like it when people complain all the time about the same thing repeatedly. It can be taxing to my energy. Story 10. Complaining about the same issue without taking action to fix it. Vent if you need to, I understand, but if you are not doing anything to help or prevent the problem, why are we discussing it for the 6th time? Story 11. When things are not perfect for complainers, they complain. When things are perfect, complainers find a way to create a problem. This is a personality trait rooted in negativity, and it is annoying. Story 12. Some of the time, people are not complaining, just being realistic. It is the listener who perceives it as complaining. I tell you the glass is half empty, because I used empty instead of full. It is perceived as negative when all I was doing was stating a fact. Story 13. It sucks the energy out of the room. In reality, no one actually cares unless you pay for someone to care. Everyone has issues. Everyone is trying to get through something. You are not special. Story 14. I think it is the frequency of the complaining. If someone is always complaining, it is just draining on everyone involved. However, if they complain when it makes sense and they have a point, they can be helpful. I do not complain. I will always endure and move forward. A leader might be wrong, but I will not call it out. In this case, the complainer can be useful, provided they articulate the complaint with some tact. Story 15. My approach is this. If you can change something, do not complain. If you can change it but not quickly, complain for 5 minutes. If you cannot change it, complain for 5 minutes and then mentally note how it will or will not affect you after 5 years. After that, it becomes a matter of resilience and acceptance. Story 16. To me, there is complaining and then there is constant complaining. I do not mind a complaint about mundane things occasionally. It is often how we relate to people and communicate. What I cannot stand is someone who always has something to complain about, especially if the complaints are all about their life, work, or family. That is constant complaining to me, and I do not want to hear it all. Story 17. It is more annoying when people complain about problems they continuously create themselves through a toxic lifestyle. Story 18. It depends on who is complaining. If you have a positive bias towards someone, you will listen and not feel perturbed. But if you have a negative bias, you will feel the opposite. I have a neighbor with two older children, about the same age and gender. If one complains, she listens and sympathizes, but if the other complains about the same thing, she becomes annoyed. I do not know the dynamic there, but the biases are clear. Story 19. It reminds them they are unhappy with no real way out, that injustice or threats to their safety are scaring them too. It brings people down. But thank goodness for the complainers and the aspiring world changers. For young people and newcomers with fresh perspectives who say, "Hey, wait a minute, are you kidding me? That's just wrong." People who remain silent, do nothing, accept anything, and endure without protest mostly hurt others and themselves needlessly. Then, when things do change despite their lack of involvement, they get left behind to stew in their own frustrations. Want better? Do better. See you're wrong? Try to right it. Find out. Complain. Be an advocate for change. Story 20. They are usually not looking for a solution, but an outlet for their frustration and broader disappointment in life. They lack the awareness to recognize it, so they will drag everyone down with them in an unconscious attempt to level the emotional playing field. This is a classic case of misery loves company. Story 21. This is one of those potential future challenging questions where there is a ceiling and a floor to the response. Someone who has legitimate complaints and is trying to help is different from someone who constantly complains about anything and everything. Some people I have experienced personally are the kind of contrarian who just pick a position to argue against, regardless of an actual thought or argument. They just want to be seen as different by not going along with everyone else. Again, there is a ceiling and a floor there. You can be a friendly contrarian who just enjoys a bit of trolling, or you can be an actively toxic person who has no social interaction without some kind of conflict. It is the second person in both cases whom I despise. It is because they contribute nothing but anxiety. If you have an actual disagreement about the substance we're talking about, that is valuable and I want to hear it. We can both learn and grow from constructive criticism. But not all criticism is constructive. Some people seem to need a whole semester-long course to understand the difference. Story 22. Because it shows that you have no home training. Who allows their children to whine past the age of 5? There is no telling what other basic life skills they have not been taught. Also, it shows a huge lack of self-awareness. Story 23. For me, my defense mechanism is to be overly positive. I feel like I cannot have a complaint about anything because then I am just being a complainer. Being overly positive is draining, and not being able to have a valid complaint without seeming like a hypocrite is frustrating. Story 24. It's not about the complaining, but what they want to do with it afterwards is my concern. I don't like it when people come to me to complain and make it seem like they want help or advice, but when you try to give it, they get upset. That is where my biggest problem lies. Just before you say anything, before you start, I need to know flat out, do you want me to give advice or do you just want me to listen? They don't often like it when I mention that, which can cause some problems, but I really don't care. At the end of the day, I know they will likely tell me everything regardless. Story 25. When people complain about something that is part of their daily job, I pull the maintenance parts for motor maintenance. They sit for 4 months, then the mechanics come in and throw a massive fit because the motor is down and they need all these parts. I point to the shelf and the multiple reminder emails I sent them. Complain all you want. You let it happen. Story 26. I really do not mind someone complaining. However, complainers find literally anything to complain about, which becomes exhausting. This is not just difficult for the listener, but also for the complainer. Focusing on the negativity in everything gives them a negative vibe. Story 27. I have a friend who always complains about her 40-year-old son who lives with her. We do not hang out much anymore. He is a moocher and she enables him. It is kind of sad. Story 28. When someone complains, I'm hungry, There is an implication that those listening should do something about it, but it provides no direction for actually solving the problem. If someone instead says, "I'm hungry, can we go to Taco Bell?" it no longer feels like a burden. Instead, it feels like a question. It can seem like people who complain without suggesting solutions are just creating problems for others. It is especially frustrating when helpful listeners make suggestions that get rejected. "I'm hungry. Okay. Want to go to Taco Bell?" "No." "Pizza Hut?" "No." "McDonald's?" "No." "I have a granola bar. Do you want that?" "No." You can see how this is extremely frustrating. The listener is trying to help, but the complainer is barely participating. In summary, complaints can feel like being asked to solve a problem. Story 29. There is a difference between complaining about a problem and talking over your problem. To demonstrate, I'll use the example of a professional complainer, someone who writes letters of complaint about every service they receive, from housing to restaurants to the library. It might also be the neighborhood drama king or queen, or the neighborhood gossip. This person has an underlying psychological problem, and their attempt to deal with it is to make it someone else's problem. Their complaining, ironically, does not acknowledge their problem. It keeps the problem in place and just shifts responsibility to others. Essentially, it is like putting your diaper in someone else's hand. Unlike children who cannot clean their diaper, adults are expected to understand the true nature of their problem and seek solutions. When a person seeks to talk their problem over with someone, they acknowledge the root of the problem and seek help for it. For example, "My neighbor is so loud, I cannot relax. I wonder what I could do to find some peace. Perhaps I should get foam earplugs." Or, "My partner or friend is so toxic. I think I need to let go of that relationship, set strong boundaries, or learn to tune them out. Do you mind if I talk over my options with you?" Sometimes you just want someone to listen without offering advice, and that is fine too. It becomes an issue when one is not practicing self-awareness and goes through life complaining instead of understanding and growing. We can gain understanding through conversations, including online discussions. Always welcome. When you face a problem, ask yourself, "Why does this bother me? Is there an opportunity here for me to grow?" Ask for feedback and reflect on those responses. I don't know your age or gender, but take it from a 41-year-old woman. It is rare to find someone who practices self-awareness. If you can develop it, and I highly recommend you do for your mental health and growth, you will have a massive advantage in life, including in emotionally mature relationships. In sum, please feel invited to talk, but let your agenda be your own curiosity to understand where you struggle with what you complain about, rather than mindless grumbling, complaining, and gossiping. From a psychological perspective, there is something called the shadow self. The parts we hate about others are often parts of our own unintegrated shadow. For example, ask yourself what irritates you about someone, then ask if you ever behave that way. If you see that you do and acknowledge it, you have taken part of yourself out of the shadow and integrated it into your conscious awareness. That growth in self-awareness is the work of psychotherapy. What bugs us is often a weakness within us. It is okay to talk about those feelings, and you should. Talking cushions the hard landings of the growth process. Allow yourself to keep growing psychologically. It will serve you well. I'm glad you asked this question. Story 30. Often people could remain silent and actually solve the problem, but they decide to spend 10 times the time complaining instead. Also, many people complain about the consequences of their own decisions. Story 31. I don't like when people are presented with facts and information and still complain instead of acting on what they know. A prime example is someone I know who complains about life being unfair because someone disagreed with him, in this case, myself. He claims to be a ladies' man. Numerous women I have talked to say their number one turnoff is complaining and whining. This applies across race and ethnicity. My friend circle is very diverse. I told this to the guy, and he still complains instead of doing any self-reflection. Story 32. If you are going to complain about something, you have to at least make it funny. Otherwise, all you are doing is contributing to the misery index of your audience. Story 33. This is a silly question that really only has one answer, as you can see in the comments. I do not know how you would expect any diversity with a "what do you not like about mean people?" kind of generic one-answer question, for example. Your question is pretty much, why do you not like complainers? Just worded slightly differently, which is vague and not meaningful. How many answers can you expect when you ask what people do not like about complainers? You answered your own question in the title. There is a big difference between someone who sends their plate back at a restaurant because they were brought a salad instead of shrimp versus someone who is nonstop complaining about the sky being orange during a particular sunset versus orange and purple. Again, your question is vague. As you can tell, I am tired of these low-effort posts in this subreddit. Our /self is what you are looking for. Story 34. When you do something, you want it to go smoothly. If someone complains, they are ruining the experience. No one wants their experience ruined. Story 35. Someone who complains takes up everyone's time and attention to inflate their own ego while giving back nothing but negativity. Story 36. Whining is annoying. If you were complaining and at the same time collaborating with people on how to find solutions, I can admire that. But if you are just whining, you are a child throwing a tantrum in my eyes, and I am not listening to you. Story 37. There is a sense that they are only conscious of themselves and their own problems, and they behave as though other people and their problems do not exist. Story 38. It depends on what they are complaining about. Usually, you find out they are complaining because they believe they are entitled to do it in a way to receive free items. Story 39. Usually, they take something happening to the whole room and act like it is only happening to them. That gets old really fast. Story 40. I don't mind any complainers. I mind complainers who cause problems or avoid solutions. Even more, I hate when someone complains illogically or lacks self-awareness. It's like if someone talks every day about how drunk drivers are stupid and constantly damage their cars, and then that person complains about spending $2,000 to fix their car. They hit a tree while driving drunk and say, "I don't know why I have such bad luck." You criticize drunk drivers and explain this happening daily, yet you don't know why your car troubles happened. Story 41. Complaining just drags everyone's mood down without solving anything. If you need a minute to vent, fine, but then solve your problems. Story 42. Complaining itself is normal. It is that they do not do anything about it that is irritating. Many people say they cannot afford anything but will not work. Story 43. To me, it is people who complain about the same thing repeatedly, knowing they can fix it but choose not to. I had a friend at work who was constantly complaining about her problematic boyfriend, and I finally told her that I did not want to hear about it anymore. She said, "Fair enough," and took it quite well. I understand she is emotionally hurting, and I am her friend, but at some point you have to take responsibility for your life. People are much more capable than they think they are to fix their situation. Story 44. Complainers just state the obvious. They whine about what is wrong and do nothing to fix it. As a gamer and as someone working difficult jobs all their life, it almost always indicates who the weakest and least capable people are. Complaining, especially finger-pointing, is how many people hide their inadequacies. Story 45. That depends on the nature of the complaint. For me, someone is bringing my attention to a problem I mostly did not cause or cannot solve. It is like ringing an alarm. It is great if it is an actual emergency and used correctly, but irritating and stressful if it is frequent and nothing seems to get resolved. There is also a difference between, "Let me inform you about some positive and negative things currently happening in my life," and "I am poor at managing my negative emotions, so I am going to make them your problem." I like being informed. I do not like other people giving me chores. Story 46. It just brings negativity. Some people, like my mother, believe that complaining helps them. It never has for me. Vocalizing it only makes the situation seem worse. Story 47. Because it is preferable to take action to fix a problem rather than complain about it. People who complain excessively are weak, entitled, and spoiled. Story 48. If it is a genuine complaint, then let us figure it out. If it is complaining for the sake of it, or worse, it turns into whining, then you are just bringing everyone's mood down. Story 49. What I cannot stand is when you offer any kind of solution or advice, and they always say something like, well, yeah, but, like, forget it. I cannot help you if you do not want help. You just want to complain. It is so exhausting to be around. If it is the occasional, I had a rough day and I just need to vent, I am fine with that. But constant complaining all the time about everything? I do not need that energy. Story 50. For me, it's when someone complains repeatedly about something that has a solution, but they will not take any action to enact that solution. Complaining about how much it sucks to have an illness that is easily treatable while being able to afford medical care that would resolve the issue in a few days. It is similar for people who have easy access to therapy but refuse it, yet complain about how miserable they are and say they should probably get help but refuse it when offered. People who complain about political issues they supported or, worse, made fun of those in favor of, even knowing those things would end up harming them in the first place. I feel like if you have the means to fix your problem but refuse to try, you forfeit the right to complain. Story 51. There are different types of complainers. Some people complain about something different every day. They might complain with a joke and a story about nonsense, or they might complain with a whine and a woe is me attitude. There are complainers who complain about the same thing every day, repeating the same story constantly. Some complainers can only speak in complaints and cannot have a normal conversation. There are people who are genuinely going through difficult times and need to vent. Some have chronic bad luck, experiencing misfortunes frequently. Others are in pain, feel cranky, and want others to understand that they are miserable. Some people have more tolerance for listening to complaints than others or certain types of complaints. However, if you say the same thing day after day for months, it becomes tiring. If you can only speak in complaints, it gets annoying. Story 52. It drains the room. People want connection, not a constant reminder of what is wrong without effort to change it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.